Welcome to the podcast, everyone. We're talking March Madness. We're talking media rights madness, expansion madness, postseason tournament madness. There's too many of them. I am Jon Wilner. You can read me at wilnerhotline.com and my partner, John Canzano, at johncanzano.com. How are you doing up there? You ready for the tournament?
Yeah, I am. How many brackets do you fill out? Are you a one bracket person? Are you do you believe in multiple brackets, men's, women's? What are you doing?
Just one bracket for work purposes.
Okay.
I have not entered an office pool in a few years. When I have the occasion, I will send a buddy or two up in Reno a few bills here and there, maybe for a specific game or two to bet. But I'm not big on the office pools. How about you?
Yeah, I get asked a lot, and I feel like from a camaraderie standpoint, I should do it. But it's a lose-lose proposition for you and I in those kinds of settings, because people expect us to do well. We don't. They're looking for us in the standings.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, if you do win the thing, then everyone goes, well, you're supposed to win that thing, So everybody, there's no winning this.
Yeah, but, it's like when Oregon plays Montana, right? There's no value in that one. So
I did do a johncanzano.com pool.
Oh,
and I linked it in the Monday mailbag if anybody wants to go and take a crack at it. But I thought, why not lean into it? I did one, but I keep the same bracket. I don't change my bracket around, whether I'm doing my own bracket or what my picks are. I just have one bracket. I fill it out the same way. I have the same good and bad picks every year in that bracket. And I'm just hoping, I can get maybe 2 or 3 of the Final Four participants this year. And
did you, I had a hard time not picking number 1 seeds. I usually don't. I would much rather figure out the 5 or 6 seed that makes it all the way through. Than just pick the ones. But this year I found myself thinking, boy, it's hard to pick against Houston, Duke, and Florida especially.
Yeah. And I did, I think I have St. John's in there because I love that story. And I think Pitino being in this thing and the way they play it's a lot of fun. But yeah, you're right. Like, really hard to not see Duke coming out of that region. Even if Cooper Flagg's not right to start the tournament, they've got enough to get through a couple of rounds before they really would need him. And then, Houston, defensive juggernaut, they're going to put you in a headlock and they're going to, hold you to 50 points and beat you. And Florida is really good. The SEC, obviously, getting a million bids into the tournament, the Florida's the best of them. And so other than that, I mean, I even was tempted. Who is it? Auburn and the other one that is.
Yeah, Auburn's the other 1 seed.
Tempted with them too, but it's kind of why, like, when I filled out the women's bracket, I had more fun doing it because I picked some squirrely things to happen in that bracket. But we shall see. We shall see how it goes.
Who do you like? You got any Cinderella?
No, I don't really have a glass slipper team because I was like you. It was 1s and 2s and 3s as I looked into, deep into the tournament. I think there are some teams that are going to win some early round games. I think Yale is awfully interested in an early round game. I'm really curious to see if this is the year that St. Mary's and Randy Bennett can they win a couple games? Can they get to the Sweet 16? They sure could use it. It would be a little bit of a posturing preening moment for St. Mary's if they want to be included as a basketball school someday in the Pac-12. But other than that, I really kind of picked it straight ahead. I didn't know what to do with North Carolina because they shouldn't be in this bracket, but now they're probably motivated, to be in the bracket. Like, so initially when I filled out the bracket, I was like, could North Carolina go on a run? I don't know. What'd you do with Carolina?
I got them in the Sweet 16. Just because I figured that's the kind of stuff that happens in the tournament, right? The team that everybody thinks shouldn't be in ends up getting hot and winning a few games, and they certainly have the talent. My issue with Carolina getting in, I didn't think they deserved to be in with that quad 1 record, but my bigger issue was just the whole process, right? The system of having Carolina's athletic director as chair of the committee, and the idea that just recusing himself would remove any bias toward Carolina in the committee room. I mean, those folks spend a lot of time together over the course of the year and over the course of this week or last week. And it's just human nature. You have a personal relationship with somebody, you work with them a lot. You're going to have a subconscious lean in their favor, I think. And so having a sitting AD as chair of the committee, whether it's the basketball or the football, I thought the CFP thing was wrong too. I just think they have to change it, and the chair needs to be someone who's completely neutral.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, like Stu Jackson, the WCC commissioner, explained this to me in Las Vegas because, he's part of that committee, and he says when they talk about a WCC team, he has to leave the room. And so he leaves the room, he sits in this other room, and then a buzzer goes off and a light goes off that tells him it's safe to come back in. And he said when you walk back in, everyone's quiet and they're all kind of looking at you. And he says it's evident they've been talking about you and they've been talking about your teams. It's like people gossiping behind your back. And so, yeah, there is all this shoulder rubbing going on. And I'll go even further with North Carolina. Like, clearly their resume not good. And the committee itself put Drake in front of them on the overall seeding list. Yeah. Drake isn't in the tournament, Wilner, if they don't win their conference tournament. So why is Carolina in the tournament? So the logic doesn't hold up and it looks bad. And I think that's, the next best thing to or the next worst thing to impropriety is the appearance or the cloud of impropriety, especially on something this important. So I agree with you that the chair of the committee should be somebody who is got no dog in the fight. Put Oliver Luck in there, make somebody else the chair of the committee who really doesn't have a school or an affiliation. Yeah. And we'd all probably feel a little better about it. And you're right. Ward Manuel, the Michigan AD, was the chair of the CFP committee. Rob Mullins, the Oregon AD, was the prior chair of the CFP committee. And you can't tell me that, when they're going out to dinner or they're talking in the hallways, that pressure isn't there. There's already pressure with North Carolina being a brand to get them in the bracket. Yeah. You never see these little things, these little scandals fall in the way of a school from a small conference. It's the power conferences exerting their power.
And the fact that Bubba Cunningham, North Carolina's AD, has bonuses built into his contract based on the Tar Heels' performance in the NCAAs just adds to it. Now, I think he's on the up and up, but it's the perception. And if you lose the public trust in this process, they've got a big problem, I think. And this was the furthest they've gone toward the cliff of losing public trust.
Yeah, I talked to Mark Cuban one time. Remember when all the NBA, Tim Donaghy, the officiating scandal that ripped through the NBA? And in the wake of that, David Stern had appointed this 5-star general to be the head of officiating and tried to fix it. But there still was this whisper about the playoffs and the star treatment. And, does David Stern want these teams playing, these big market teams to advance? And Cuban told me, he said, just the fact that we're talking about it is bad. It's bad for the game. It's bad for the tournament. And the same goes for the NCAA tournament. And it's just bad that this is even a storyline, because the storyline should be, look at all these great schools. Look at this great NCAA championship thing. And it's the kind of thing, Wilner, that gives me a little bit of pause as the Power Four wants to take over management of this thing. I don't know that they're equipped to manage it.
Well, the NCAA does a very good job running the postseason events, whether it's March Madness, baseball, golf. That's the thing that they do the best, is run these championships. And for the big conferences to actually take over operational control, I agree that's trouble. I think it's potentially trouble that they're talking about adding 8 teams to get to 76. Those 8 teams, are they going to be a nice mix of power schools and mid-majors, or is 7 of those bids going to go to 17 and 13 teams from the Big Ten and SEC? I think that's another reason to be concerned about the long-term trajectory of the tournament.
What kinds of questions do you have about the tournament? Because one that came up in my mind was, is the SEC really as good as we all think they might be, or as the committee thinks they might be? There's some interesting Big Ten SEC matchups in the first couple of rounds potentially that might answer that question. I really like Michigan State as a potential disruptor in the tournament. They're a really good team and play great defense. And Tom Izzo's obviously a experienced coach. But what questions do you have for the tournament.
Well, one is about the coaches, right? I mean, you mentioned one, Izzo, Patino's another, Calipari. There's some old guard coaches that have a real chance to do something in this tournament. I think that's an interesting storyline. To me, Duke is really interesting because they are the favorite, right? And this is John Shire's third, fourth year, and they've got 3 lottery picks. And if they don't make the Final Four, I mean, it's going to be a firestorm in Durham, given the talent they have. So that's one. The SEC, I think, to me, it's all downhill from Sunday. That was the peak for them because there's no way with 14 teams that they are going to advance enough teams deep enough to justify 14 teams in the public's mind, right? Even if they get 10, well, you still lost 4. You weren't that good, right? They're almost set up to fail at this point because they have 14 teams. And the Big Ten and the SEC got 20 of the 37 at-large berths, right? That's a worrisome trend, I think, for everybody else, just like we're seeing a worrisome trend in college football.
Yeah, everybody who isn't focused on the money has to know that the real celebration in the SEC offices was about how much money 14 teams are going to be worth in this bracket. Like, it's going to be a record number. It's going to be a staggering dollar figure that they end up pulling away from this tournament. There are some traditional teams that, like Gonzaga, is in an interesting matchup in the first round, an 8-9 matchup that I think is a real coin toss. And, I think I'd be surprised to see Gonzaga win maybe more than one game in this tournament based on how they've been this year. But St. Mary's, I'm watching UC San Diego. I'm looking at some of the mid-majors programs and going, can Yale rattle around a little bit? Like, Yale's got some guys. And so you have a chance to see some things, but I think you're right. I'm like you. As I went through, I kept seeing 1s and 2s and maybe a 3 here or there as the teams were picked to advance. And, I like Wisconsin a little bit. I like Michigan State. I think they're, in the Big Ten, those 2 teams should play a little bit. I think Oregon's going to win their opening round game against Liberty, but then it's a coin toss against Arizona in the second round. That's going to be a fun one. I'll be at that one in Seattle, but
Oregon against Arizona and Seattle, that would be great. I hope both teams advance to that point. I'm also the Mountain West. We saw San Diego State got run off the court yesterday. Mountain West has really performed poorly in the tournament over the last 6-8 years. I mean, really bad, beyond the statistical probability of bad. And other than San Diego State, those teams haven't won any games in years, and or any first round games, I should say, in years. So is this a year where the Mountain West finally gets a couple through? I'm also kind of trying to watch what happens on the court with the backdrop of the Mountain West and the Pac-12, trying to get media rights deals done and the impact of that, which we can talk about. So there's always a lot going on, but I never forget about just the bigger trajectory of, are the SEC and Big Ten going to kind of take over control, operational control, competitive control of this whole thing over the course of time, like they are in football?
I am in the ACC. You've got a real bad conference. They had 0 ranked teams play each other in conference play, but you've got Duke at the top, and then Clemson and Louisville, who I think are respectable, and then nothing beyond that. And I didn't pick Carolina into the Sweet 16, but I did wonder about their motivation and how far they could get, because if I'm those guys, I am locked in right now. And you're right. It's exactly the kind of thing that happens, that they go on a run and they go, oh, look, this justifies them being in the tournament, which doesn't justify them being in the tournament at all. Anybody can go on a run in this tournament, as we have figured out. Who's your national champion? Because I had a hard time with it, but I went Duke. I think if they get Cooper Flag back, I think they're winning this thing.
Yeah, I got Duke too. I mean, they got 3 lottery picks, and they can play defense. That's been their Achilles heel sometimes when they have lost early in the tournaments because they can't defend well. They can defend on the perimeter. They can defend at the rim. They can score. they're absolutely loaded, and I think they got a very favorable draw too. Because I look at Alabama as, based on how they played lately, Alabama is the most vulnerable of the 2 seeds.
Yeah.
And so if I'm Duke, that's exactly what I want is Alabama. I don't want St. John's. I probably don't want Tennessee, and I don't want Michigan State. So Alabama is absolutely the best draw for Duke.
The only pause I had on Duke was I think, if Cooper Flagg's not healthy, that if Baylor can get out of that first round matchup, Baylor can give Duke a little bit of a run, I think, and stay with them. Yeah, I don't think Oregon can beat Duke. And you're right. Oregon already beat Alabama on the other side of the bracket earlier in the year, but I think Duke gets a clean ride once Flagg's back. But it looked to me like, no one's saying this, Wilner, but my expert medical opinion from watching this on social media, it looked to me like a little bit more of a high ankle sprain. And those things take a little bit of time. So I won't be surprised if he's not available in the first and second round and they sit him and give him a chance to wait, because they've said, hey, they're going to wait till he's 100%. And I don't see him at 100% until maybe the Sweet 16 round.
Could be. I mean, Baylor's an interesting pick, right? VJ Edgecombe is a top 5 pick in the draft, right? He's the kind of player that can make winning plays in the last couple minutes. Do you think that Dana Altman's got one more surprise in him?
I think, he's done great with this team. And you look at their last 9 games, they're 8-1 in their last 9. Their only losses at Michigan State in the Big Ten tournament. I think they were just kind of out of gas at that point. They had, traveling east. They played back-to-back 9 a.m. body clock games, and they end up in this, real defensive struggle against Michigan State. You've got Jackson Shelstad who can play. You've got TJ Bamba, who has been underrated, I think, in that last 8 or 9 games. He's been terrific. And Nathan Biddle's starting to show me something. 7-footer who has essentially proven that he can take over a game. He did it in the Wisconsin overtime period. He won that game for Oregon. And so, it'll be really interesting if they can get into a matchup against Duke, because Biddle will be in there against another big guy who's younger than him. And this is the moment where Dana Altman should be running his offense through Biddle and letting an upperclassman take advantage of a young guy. But let's see what happens. I mean, Altman's just been fantastic in tournaments. He's never at Oregon. I think he's 7-0 in first round games. They're not losing to Liberty. I talked to Richie McKay, the Liberty coach, yesterday. He's starting 2 guards, Wilner, that are under 6 feet tall. I think he's going to win that game. This is not a great Liberty team by Liberty standards. I think Richie McKay's had better teams there, but I think Altman can beat Arizona. I think he can beat Liberty. I don't think he can beat Duke. And I think that's where the ceiling is for Oregon, right there at the Sweet 16.
Gotcha. I do wish in some ways that Oregon and Arizona weren't paired together in the second round. There's not that much opportunity for the western half of the country.
It's true.
First of all, there's not any high seeds from the West. You're going to have one of those 2 eliminated. Utah State's playing UCLA. That's another issue too. UCLA, plays the Big Ten, plays in the Big Ten, goes home to finish the regular season against USC, goes back to Indy, goes back home. Now he's got to go to Lexington to play Utah State. I do wonder about their exhaustion level. But generally speaking, college basketball in the West with Arizona pretty good, UCLA and Gonzaga down a little. The San Francisco regional, you look at who is going to advance, and there's Gonzaga's not in the West, Arizona, UCLA, Oregon, none of them are in the West. Yeah. I do wonder about the Chase Center crowds next week.
It lends itself to the question that college football had to answer when they expanded to 12 teams. Like, can you include the Pacific time zone? Can you include the Mountain time zone? They did a good job, of getting in Arizona State and Boise State and Oregon into that bracket that I thought drew in the western part of the United States. But you're right. Your money there. I mean, there's a local issue there with teams in the West, and it's evident that the NCAA tournament looked at Seattle and went, let's put Oregon and Arizona there because Liberty and Akron are not going to draw. Let's put Oregon and Arizona there, and let's sell some tickets.
The closest teams geographically to San Francisco in the West are Grand Canyon seated 13th and Colorado State seated 12th, right? Otherwise, San Francisco is going to have a whole bunch of Eastern and Central time zone schools, and boy, I don't know what it's going to be like there. It could be quite kind of quiet. So that's something that we can maybe get into in coming weeks, future episodes. But just the general state of college basketball in the West is something I'm going to be watching throughout the tournament.
Well, let's pivot a little bit to another question. Are there too many tournaments? The Crown is the latest Fox's tournament that they announced in September, where they're going to take a bunch of teams and stick them on TV between the Elite Eight and the Final Four and try to sell some commercial airtime. Oregon State's playing in this thing, and Oregon State, Wayne Tinkle told me the reason he's playing it is it's more exposure for his players, it's more money for his players, it's a chance for his players to get rewarded. And they had to pick between the NIT and going in the Crown, and they wanted to go to the Crown.
Well, you got the NIT, you got the Crown now. There's also the CBI. College, the CIT. Yeah. There's too many, right?
Yeah, we didn't need another tournament.
This one is interesting because Fox is heavily involved. So they got the Big Ten, their conference partners.
Yeah,
Big East, Big 12, Big 10, they had to go take, USC's in it, right? USC, I don't even think they qualified for the Big 10 tournament. So, a lot of tournaments and the decentralized governance structure.
Right.
We saw that issue with like UC Riverside being committed to 2 and none, and then they had to back channel some stuff. It's really hard to follow. But it does suggest that with 364 teams, you need to have more than just a 68-team NCAA field, right? Because there are more schools that want to keep playing, right? You think about the bowl scene, there are 41 bowls. So you got 82 schools out of 134 in FBS are playing in the postseason. Whereas in college basketball, if you're just limiting it to the NCAAs, it's 68 out of 364 or something.
Yeah, but I don't want to see those bowl games. I don't want the Weed Whacker Bowl. I know why it's on. It's because ESPN owns it, and
ESPN sees value in it.
And they see value in it. They put it on, and then what do? We sit on the sofa and we watch it. I'll do a little bit of that. There is a lull between the Elite Eight and the Final Four. And normally that's where ADs are trying to hire coaches. Now you're going to see a bunch of coaches coaching games in that period. And Oregon State is excited to play in this thing. The question I had for Wayne Tinkle and Oregon State and all the other teams playing is, how do you keep your team and your players engaged and interested in the time between now and when this tournament starts? Because it doesn't, like the NIT, they had games yesterday. So the Crown, they're waiting to hold this thing, and they're going to have to sit around. So they're going to really have to work hard, those coaches, to keep their players focused.
They will. I mean, it used to be that playing in these tournaments was great prep for next year. Yeah. It was like extra practices for bowl teams. And you could draw a connection between teams that succeeded in the postseason tournaments and how they were going to do the next season because they got the extra experience. But now with the transfer portal, every roster is so diluted with experience that I don't know that there's a value in it from that standpoint in terms of the year-to-year build. But hey, it's competition, and I guess to a certain extent, there's a market for it, obviously, because these new tournaments keep coming up.
Pivot a little bit. You had an update on Pac-12 media rights, or at least the backdrop of Pac-12 media rights. For our viewers, the Pac-12 is seeking a media deal, obviously, in football, basketball, 2026 to 2031. There's been a lot of speculation about when this deal will be announced. What do you know, Wilner?
Well, I just was curious about the impact that success in the NCAA tournament could have on the media rights negotiations, because it's this unusual backdrop with, excuse me, it's this unusual backdrop with the tournament playing out and the Pac-12 and the Mountain West are both in the middle of negotiating new media deals. You've got neighboring rival conferences. You got their teams that are shifting allegiances. Everybody's and you got what, six of them are in the NCAA. So if Gonzaga gets to the Final Four, could that help the Pac-12? If Grand Canyon, which is going to be in the Mountain West, if they win a game or two, does that help the Mountain West? Does it get them more money at the negotiating table? So I asked a few folks who have actually done this for a living, negotiated media deals, how strong is the connection? And the answer I got is basically, if there's any value in success this month, it is incremental. It's not exponential. If Gonzaga makes the Final Four, that's not going to materially change what the Pac-12 could get in the media rights deal, because the networks take a broader view, right? It's multiple years of success. And so Gonzaga's success has already been built into the valuation that's effectively being negotiated right now. So if they win 2 more games, 3 more games, that doesn't necessarily change the way the numbers are modeled. But at the same time, a bad tournament for either of those 2 conferences wouldn't necessarily undercut their value.
I think it probably matters more. It's more of a perception thing than anything. And, and in that sense, maybe it matters more with the expansion piece, because what you can do by having a run in the college football playoff or the NCAA tournament is you can improve your brand and your media rights value incremental. I would agree with that.
Yep.
What about timing? Because we have talked a lot about timing, and I had originally thought, hey, and a great over-under date would be the start of March Madness, over under. It now looks like that's going to go over, but by how much? And at what point, Wilner, do you start to go, ooh, are there problems here?
I don't know. Tax day seems like a good number, good date, so middle of April. I don't know that I would think that there's a problem necessarily if it's the second half of April before they get something done. Certainly into May, then you start to wonder, right?
Yeah.
But they've been good about not setting a firm date. And I don't know that what happens in the tournament would expedite anything. But I kind of feel like, early to mid-April seems about right at this point.
I had one AD tell me that the AD said, wouldn't it be great to have something to announce right around the Final Four?
Yeah.
Because you'd get a little bit more glow. And I hadn't considered the marketing part of this when I said, hey, the start of March Madness, ball goes in the air, Pac-12 comes out with an announcement. You don't want to get lost in the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of the opening week of March Madness. But right around that Crown tournament where Fox has said, hey, there's nothing going on here, let's put some basketball on TV.
Yep.
Maybe that's the time where the Pac-12 comes out and says, hey, we've got a deal in principle. We're, the final details will be available later, but here are the partners. Kind of like what Fox and the Big Ten did initially, where they announced the deal.
Yeah.
And they announced it was worth $1 billion, which really caused problems with the Pac-12 and others who were still negotiating deals. Turned out it wasn't worth $1 billion. Kevin Warren wanted that out there. But, at least being able to say we've got a deal in principle. I agree with you on April 15th. If it gets to April 15th, I start to ask questions like, hey, wait a minute. What's happening? Something gone wrong here.
Yep.
But, I originally had said last September, I said March 20th or so. I'm now thinking April 5th, April 4th.
Okay. Right before the Final Four?
Right before the Final Four, right in there. I think that would be an advantageous time to announce it.
Yep.
Because you get the glow of everybody, kind of all the media in one place, focused on one thing. You certainly have a basketball element to this conference that is interesting. So keep an eye on that. But I'll start to ask questions on tax day, just like you.
Where do you come down on the dollar versus exposure?
I'm
give up a little bit of money to get better exposure?
Yeah, I'm all about exposure. Get the exposure.
Okay.
I think, they've got good schools.
Yeah.
We're going to get into this expansion piece here a little bit. I dug around on the expansion front.
Yeah, let's go. You had a good story and a great graphic.
But I'm not a map guy, but I made a map. But I think I would go exposure. I think the exposure for this group becomes paramount. you are trying to position yourself as the fifth best, clearly the fifth best conference in the country. You need exposure that feels a little bit like the Big 12 or the ACC on some days. You don't need to be thinking about the SEC and the Big 10 if you're the Pac-12 right now. You got to get yourself in the conversation with those bottom two schools. It's really the Power 2, not the Power 4. But and it brings us to the expansion piece that, look, Pac-12 it's the same 8 or 9 schools that we've been talking about for months. I was told by a source that they met in Vegas a week ago. ADs met, and the presidents met with the ADs. They all got updates. They talked media rights. They talked expansion. I said, hey, here's the list of 8 or 9 we've all been working off of with UNLV and Memphis and Tulane and South Florida and Texas State and UTSA and Rice and Nevada and some others. And I said, has anybody changed here? And, the source told me if it was somebody not on that list, we'd be surprised.
Yeah.
So I've got a graphic that I'm going to pop up here that I think, kind of tells a little bit of a story here. And I hadn't really seen it this way until I started looking at it. But take a look at
that.
I know. It's almost like a political map. But
how long did that take you?
Too long. I thought it would be faster. But take a look at the blue states. The blue states are where the Pac-12 has existing New World members. And you can really see you can visualize the concentration of the best of the West that they were talking about. It's all, it's the California schools, San Diego State and Fresno State. It's Oregon State up in Oregon. You've got, Gonzaga and Washington State up there in Washington. Travel's easy for Boise State. And even Utah State and Colorado State. You can really see it. Now, you have that island in the middle there that is Nevada. It was just a geographical question, Wilner. This is an easy question.
It is, but it's not, right? And you got into that today. There's a whole lot of factors.
There are a lot of factors, and you can see now that Texas, the green states are all kind of possibilities. And you can see that other cluster forming in the eastern part of the country. And I think that's where the question becomes, do you go eastward, try to become the best of the rest, not the best of the West? You fly over UNLV in Nevada, and instead you go into Texas. You go Memphis, Tulane, or maybe South Florida, and create a cluster that is Texas, Memphis, Tulane, South Florida, something along those lines. Because the calculus here is, hey, your brand, your geography. Are you willing to take a low distribution? I think Texas State comes to mind as maybe they're willing to take nothing in the beginning just to be part of it. If you're going to take Texas State, do you take another Texas school to create a travel partner? Is it UTSA? Is it Rice? If you take Memphis and you take Tulane, do you grab South Florida just to end the debate? Hey, you're the fifth best conference. Clearly, look at the schools. So there's a sliding scale of brand, TV ratings, geography, what your exit fees would be, your willingness and your will to invest in athletics. And I know you've been banging the drum for Texas State, but if UNLV,
banging that drum,
I know you are. If UNLV is not available to you for one reason or another, I tend to agree with you that Texas State and maybe another Texas school or Memphis, Tulane, South Florida, they start to become interesting to me.
I'm still not sure how the math works on Memphis, Tulane, and South Florida. So my understanding is that those type of schools, the longer standing American schools, get a higher than average media rights split. Mm-hmm. So 9 or 10 million a year, let's say. So to make it worthwhile for them, when you include the travel, the Pac-12 would have to probably offer 12 million a year in media value. I don't see how the Pac-12 is going to get that much. So I'm still stuck on the math. Do you have a different view?
Here's the way you make it work. I think if you back out the money that was supposed to go to the Mountain West for poaching penalties, let's say the Pac-12 is wildly successful in that settlement, and I'm, obviously you've reported this, I've reported this. Mountain West wants to negotiate. They want to have some talks. They've got to stay the 60-day stay of this hearing. I am continue to be told that the Mountain West is interested in some kind of merger. Pac-12 is not.
Nope.
And but if the Pac-12 says to the Mountain West, look, we're not coming for UNLV and Nevada, we're leaving those alone. but we pay zero in poaching penalties. Now you've got a few $1 million more, Wilner, to go to those schools and say, we'll subsidize the media rights distribution to make it work for you. It's one way to do it. I'm not sure if it's the most ideal way. I also think, like, I looked into UTSA and Texas State. They've got money. They are investing in athletics and the rest of their campus. They've got big student body. They've got money. It's a foothold into Texas, although maybe it's like a heel into Texas, not really the whole foot. But it starts to pencil out if, like, Texas State or UTSA say, we don't need a full distribution, or maybe we don't take one in the first 2 years or something like that.
Where do you want to be in 2030? If I'm the Pac-12, I want to be in Texas, right? I want to get my foothold in now and hope that one or more schools there can grow, right? Texas State is on the I-35 corridor there, halfway between Austin and San Antonio. It's a booming area, lots of money, loads of recruits, tons of oil money for NIL and other purposes. To me, it's about acquiring chips for the long haul if you're the Pac-12. And I think Texas State is a better chip than UNLV. UNLV does work geographically, but I think you can be both the the major Western Conference, but also have a Texas school or two without losing your identity. So I don't know that they have to have UNLV to get that Western vibe. I think that it's a real interesting situation, and certainly how the legal cases play out will have a huge impact on the finances, which will have a huge impact on the direction they take.
Yeah, I kind of just, I didn't rank them, but I kind of listed, like, here are the selling points, here are the detracting points. And I think it becomes clear because that's kind of the discussion that's going on. I'm told that it's like, it's not that your brand matters. It's not that your TV ratings and your geography and your exit fees and what your math is to get them into the conference. It's not the travel expense. It's everything. It's all of things. And it's not like a spreadsheet. It's almost like, when my daughter went to go to college, we created a spreadsheet of, like, here's the tuition, here's the advantages, here's the kind of a plus minus. And it wasn't like you could just rank them. There were different reasons. And you're going through that now with your kid. Like,
I am. We're doing the same thing.
It's almost like you're picking a school. You're literally picking a school, but it's sort of this reverse engineering you have to do.
No, for sure. What did you find? I've always thought expansion is about the money. It's also about the competitive value and the institutional fit, which you could include geography in that if you wanted, or that's a separate category. But I don't know. Do you feel like any of those those umbrella categories, those buckets, you don't think any is more important than the other?
I think there's a bottom line question with how much money does it benefit the rest of the members. I think there's a travel expense question that is important to a couple of the schools in particular.
Yep.
That I originally, when the whole, when they're going after Memphis and Tulane came out, I heard there was some pushback from one school in particular that said, we just don't want to send our athletes all the way out to New Orleans and Tennessee to go play games. It kind of defeats the purpose, but they have a blank slate here.
They do.
They're picking and choosing what they want to do. I do think getting into Texas is important, but also remember, and we forgot this, right? We tend to forget this. These are presidents involved. And I kind of wonder if the academics of a place like Rice and the research and the academics and the market. Now, do you take Rice as a individual? No, you don't, because they don't have the sort of the profile and the brand and the investment in athletics that others do. But do you add Rice if you're taking one of the Texas schools? I would be awfully interested in whether the academic component of taking a school like that would appeal to the presidents who are fighting the narrative that, hey, you just added a bunch of schools that aren't like, the top academic universities.
Yeah. If Rice were just a little bit better competitively,
I know
it'd be easy, but that's a low bar and they're below it. And so that makes it a lot more complicated. Yeah. Tulane is a really good school.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they can make the math work. Your suggestion is interesting, right? Because maybe you use some of the money if you can save in mediation. But man, it's complicated. The whole thing is very complicated. And I think they've got some good there's no obvious option. I don't even think UNLV, to be honest, is an obvious option.
No, there's questions.
They got, and as you reported when you were there, right? They got a lot of money issues.
Yeah.
You wonder, can UNLV have sustained success in the revenue sharing era with NIL in the current financial situation they're facing?
How about this too? How about they had a chance to come in? UNLV was offered at the time when Utah State comes in. Pac-12 circled back, and UNLV, what did they do? They turned and signed a memo of understanding with Mountain and said, we're staying. We don't have the appetite for risk. Well, we're going to get all this money. They're going to make us whole. You know, they had a chance to come in and they turned it down. And so that matters to me. That, you know, I was there and, you know, I love Vegas. I think the Pac-12 wants to be in Vegas. I mean, I think it would be a no-brainer geographically. But the comments by the AD about not being able to pay the football coach's salary were ridiculous. That was unwise. He had to walk that back immediately. I get what he was doing. He was trying to plead poverty to the regents and to the public. But I got to think Dan Mullen and his agent were like on line one.
Yes.
After that comment was made. So I do wonder, like, if your will, I had one source tell me that, you know, an athletic department's will to win. Are they willing to invest? Are they willing to do what's necessary to win? Are they willing to take risk? That will to win matters in the.
Yes, it does.
And Texas State's got it. UTSA's got it. Memphis has it. Tulane has it. South Florida's got it.
Right.
I'm not sure about UNLV.
Well, and the Pac-12 has it. At least they're talking about it because, you know, Commissioner Teresa Gould told me, I think it's last week now, that they are considering minimum investment standards for revenue sharing, like the American Conference just implemented, $10 million a year over 3 years per school minimum. And Gould says the Pac-12 might do the same thing because they want, you know, if you got one school that isn't investing at the right level, it can drag everybody down. And I think that they are they're going to put in some standards and hold everybody accountable because they want to win. They see a path to being the best of the non-Power Four, right? And there's value in that position, especially given an expanded playoff. And they're going to, it seems to me like they're committed to doing everything they can to position themselves for that spot, so to speak.
You can read him at WilnerHotline.com. You can read me at JohnCanzano.com. Make sure you subscribe. Hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get this podcast and videocast. And we'll be back next week with an all-new episode.
Thanks, everybody.